that reeks of something far more incendiary. But what I will say is that, you know, you've got the NFL taking positions and its influence by money. I mean, they're trying to ingratiate themselves with the masses and make sure that they can get their figurative hands in anybody's wallet that they can find, because anybody, no matter what race, creed, or whatever you may come from, the bottom line is your money in this country is just as good as anybody else's if you have it. And if they can get their hands in more pockets, that's more money for them. And we all know how important revenue is to the National Football League. They show it on every occasion. I think what you're getting from the governor in that particular instance is saying, excuse me, this is our state. You have a plethora of Americans that live within this state that may feel differently than what the NFL's position is, and you need to take their wishes into consideration more so than you may be willing to, because these issues are things that affect our lives. It's not a game, and you need to address it and treat it with the seriousness that it deserves, as opposed to just ingratiating yourself into a particular equation just because the optics of it looks so good and it will facilitate you generating more money. It's not just about money, to lean on what Will would usually say on this show. It's about principle as well. And when it comes to certain issues, our principles, our beliefs, whatever they may be, resonates far more profoundly than just making some money. And that's what I got from what the governor was saying. And what I peel from that is, if you're going to ingratiate yourself into the equation and you're going to speak up about it, A, know what the hell you're talking about, and B, come from a principled position where we could have an intelligent discussion on this matter, as opposed to you just ingratiating yourself into the equation just because it looks good and it will position you to make more money. The governor is coming from a principled position, whether you agree with it or not.
Opposite.
And that much I can respect, because he's saying, hey, bring the rain if you want to, but stand for something, not just for money.
Opposite. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas's comment is so ridiculous on its face that it's transparently a political calculation, because he believes it'll be popular politically. The NFL, I mean, first of all, know your place. Governor, what are you kidding? Sports in this country has sometimes been at its best, has been on the forefront of social change. The Dodgers, I mean, Jackie Robinson made the Dodgers, broke the color line in baseball when he and other African Americans couldn't attend public schools throughout this country, all white public schools throughout this country. But he was on the Dodgers. Arizona missed out because they didn't recognize Martin Luther King's Day. Sports has sometimes used its popularity and its leverage to be on the forefront of social change. Know your place. This is not the wrong place for sports to intercede. And by the way, yes, of course, it's an economic calculation, which I think is a good sign by the NFL, because they are calculating that it's a popular enough issue that it could hurt their business if they do business with the state of Texas. And then we'll see if the governor's political calculation is correct, which I do not believe is principled at all. We'll see. I don't know if there really are principles here. I think in one case it's the governor's political calculation, the other case the NFL's bottom line calculation. But we'll see what's what. Yeah. Does the economics of it all hurt the governor politically? Or is the NFL somehow hurt in the state of Texas, which I doubt? I mean, look, you think football fans, and Texas is a rabid football state, care more about Greg Abbott than football? I disagree, but time will tell.
Well, that's why I think your statement, Max, that the governor's made a political calculus and not standing on principle, kind of you undercut yourself there. I mean, picking a fight with football and the NFL in the state of Texas doesn't reek to me of the most obvious political win a politician could go after. I think he might be doing this for other reasons than simply populist movement. But also, listen, I agree with both of you to some extent. Max, I do think sports leagues, I think Stephen A. agrees with this as well, have a place taking a position on political issues when they are important and obvious enough that their input is needed. So, for example, hearkening back to just our last segment, if for some reason, some crazy reason, some state reinstituted, for example, Jim Crow laws, would we not want the NBA, the NFL taking a position on those kind of things? The issue is this: if you're going to, you better know what you're talking about, to Stephen A's point. And the NFL on this issue, this is my issue. On this particular issue, these bathroom bills, this was an issue that did not exist 10 years ago. This was one that we weren't even having in the political sphere 10 years ago. It's one where Texas and North Carolina aren't the only states looking at passing these bills. There are 7 others. And according to CNN and CBS polls, which I think were about 9 months ago, the country's pretty divided on this. 50-50 on whether or not these laws should be enacted. So what the NFL is saying here, and when they don't explain their position, this is my position with athletes in general. If you take a position, be able to back it up. What you do is you dumb it down. You say if you boycott, if you don't do business, you say anybody that disagrees with you is the equivalent of a bigot who cannot be dealt with, who should not be done business with. And what you're telling us then is that 50% of people in these polls, or these 7 other states, are simply bigots who should not be dealt with. And that I have a problem with. I have a problem with taking this issue that is a decade old at the most and saying if you're on the wrong side of this issue, if you're on the wrong side of this issue for the next year, the last 5 years, you're not worthy of being done business with. That I have a problem with.
Well,
no, they're exercising their First Amendment rights. I mean,
hold on, Max. Hold on, Max, because I'm coming to you. I agree with what Will has said, but I agree with you, Will, but I wanted to get back to you, Max, because here's the difference. The NFL, you got to remember, this is the same league that tried to charge performers to perform at the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. Everything that they can do to get their hands on more revenue is their primary interest. Now, we all know that politicians are politicians, and they're going to go where the wind flows to some degree. We understand that. But the difference here is that the politician itself, the governor of Texas, represents the people of Texas. And there are an abundance of people who side with him on that particular issue. And he could make a legitimate argument, more so than the NFL, that he's speaking on behalf of Texans because he's the governor of Texas. And so when you take that into consideration, and he's saying to the NFL to watch yourself, I don't think he's saying sports has no place in politics or whatever. I don't think he's going that far, because we all understand that a particular athlete, like Will pointed out, if by some chance Jim Crow laws were exacted, how are you going to expect an athlete or somebody else not to speak out against that? But what he's saying, and what I think he's bringing into the focus, is that I'm coming from a moral position on behalf of the people here in Texas that I represent. You are coming at us on behalf of the NFL in terms of your revenue. What's more important? And I think he has a point in that particular argument right there.
Look, Citizens United, which was seen as a conservative ruling, is based on the idea that corporations exercise free speech through their business decisions, basically, through how they spend money. It's a First Amendment issue. I mean, and according to the governor, Will, if he was standing up for principle, or Stephen A., if he's standing up for principle, then presumably the Republican governor does not like government issuing edicts that chill or that interfere with business practices, right? Isn't that the idea?
Max, I don't think anyone's suggesting
that's what's happening here.
But no one is suggesting that the NFL doesn't have a right to take a position. I don't think Greg Abbott is saying that. He's saying you're on thin ice if you're telling 50% of this country that their position on this issue equates them to being a bigot that it should not be done business with. That is thin ice for the NFL.
I want to address that. I want to address the idea that half the population supports something. This has to be the last point, you guys, because we have to move on. Okay, that on its face means you need to be extra sensitive about how you deal with the issue. 1901, Theodore Roosevelt has Booker T. Washington to the White House. Well, half the country was outraged because it was a black man coming to dinner, not just visiting the White House, but as a dinner guest. And half the country, particularly the South, went crazy over it.
Yes.
Now, was that important? Should the point have been made back then to be very sensitive to the people who may not have even thought of themselves as bigoted or wrong-headed at the time, maybe ignorant, that their sensibilities needed to be catered to, or was it more important that the president do the right thing?
And these bathroom bills are the same kind of thing?
on this issue.
And these bathroom bills are the same kind of thing as that?
No, I'm not. That's why I'm not commenting on the bathroom issue itself, because that's a whole separate discussion. But there are many who feel that it is a moral issue. Then we should be sensitive to one side who is against it, but not to the other side that is for it.
We have to go. Obviously, a lot of layers to this issue, and it won't be going away. Will, thank you so much for being with us.